It was 1994. I was staying alone in that old, high-ceilinged Victorian house in Lincoln Park, in the freezing cold of Chicago. It was Christmas Eve. Outside, snow was pelting the windows. Inside the house, only the eerie crackling of the fireplace echoed. Just as I was about to fall asleep around midnight, I heard a sound. From inside the fireplace, from the depths of the chimney, a strange creaking, like a ticking. At first, I thought it was the wind, but it wasn't. It was a more rhythmic sound. It was as if someone was trying to slide down a narrow space. I got up and approached the fireplace. When I opened the lid, the heat of the ashes hit my face. I gently leaned my head inside. In the darkness above, I noticed two things dangling down between the soot. Those two things looked like old muddy boot tips. One was hanging right above me, inside the chimney. I held my breath, scared, thinking it was a thief. Just then, a muffled breathing sound came from the chimney. A deep breathing sound, moaning softly, like someone in pain. Someone was trying to enter through my chimney on Christmas Eve and was stuck there. I called the police immediately. By the time the crews arrived, the sound had long since stopped. The fire department began breaking the chimney with axes and sledgehammers. I watched them, trembling with fear in the corner. When the wall collapsed, what we saw wasn't a thief. It was my elderly neighbor who had been missing for weeks. But that wasn't the scary part. The man hadn't entered there that night. The medical examiner's report said the man could have been stuck there for days. While I was drinking my coffee in that house, watching TV, sleeping, that man was right above my head, trapped in the wall, in the chimney, struggling for days. Until I heard those breaths, I had been living in the same room as a corpse. That day, I emptied the house and moved out. I'm not even sure I could live in a house with a fireplace again. One Christmas Eve, without knowing it would be the night my life would change forever, my family and I celebrated the new year. Our house was 2 stories high. We lived in West Virginia, and that night, my house turned to ashes. My name is George. One Christmas Eve, after celebrating Christmas with my family, I lost my 4 children in a hellish inferno that same night. Or so I thought. It was around 1:30 a.m. We were all asleep in our rooms. I woke up to my wife Jennifer's screams. The house was on fire. The stairs were burning. My 2 children and I rushed outside, but 4 of them were still upstairs. I was frantic. I immediately thought to grab the stairs from the garden, but they weren't where they usually were. Someone had taken them. I thought of my truck. I'd pull it up to the wall and climb through the window. I got behind the wheel, turned the ignition. Nothing. I tried again and again, but it was impossible. That trusty truck never started that night. The phone lines were down. We couldn't call for help. I watched the house collapse. I watched my children disappear in that fire, shouting their names. When day broke, the fire department began sifting through the ashes. My wife and I wanted to find what was left of our children and give them a proper burial. But we couldn't. There wasn't a single trace. A fire couldn't completely vaporize 4 children down to their bones. That day, I understood. Someone had stolen those stairs. Someone had sabotaged that truck, and my children weren't in that fire. They had been kidnapped. Years passed, and one Christmas morning I received a letter. Inside was a photo of a young adult. It said Lewis on the back, my missing son's name. No one helped us. The case was closed due to lack of evidence. Now every Christmas, I look at those empty seats and hope that one day the doorbell will ring. I'm sure my children aren't dead. I'm waiting for them to come back one day. I was in an isolated alpine village in Austria on Krampus night. Among the horned, furry costumes wandering around with torches as a tourist, I just wanted to have fun. Camera in hand, I was going with the flow of the crowd. Everywhere was filled with the sound of bells and shouting. But something caught my attention. At the back of the group, there was a figure much taller than the others, almost 2 meters tall. The others were joking around, adjusting their masks. But the fur on this figure didn't look like a costume. It seemed to be sprouting from its skin. And the mask, it wasn't like a mask. It moved like a real face. I zoomed my camera in on it. At that very moment, it stopped. The noise of the crowd suddenly turned into a roar in my ears. That enormous creature slowly turned its head towards me. The eyes staring at me through the mask's eye holes were yellow. They didn't look like human eyes. They had vertical, animal-like pupils. My heart started pounding, as if it would jump out of my chest. I was scared and started running. I darted into an alley, wanting to escape. I could hear the heavy footsteps behind me, the hard thuds of thump, thump. I entered a narrow dead-end street and hid behind a trash container. The footsteps stopped at the beginning of the street. A few minutes later, I gathered my courage and looked. There was no one there. I saw my own boot prints on the street, covered in fresh snow. But right at the beginning of the street, there were a pair of huge broken goat hoof prints. They had trampled through the snow. When I returned to the town square, the masked actors were still there. Everyone was present. No one had seen that tall figure. I opened the camera to watch the video I had taken that night, but the images were distorted. There was only a pitch-black screen and the heavy animalistic growl that followed me as I ran away. Since that day, I never go out on Christmas Eve, because I feel like those yellow eyes are still watching me.